well, next to last presentation, Changing the Status Quo. And the subtitle is, Why Didn't That Stupid Thinking Process Work? And I decided that I needed this early on in my training of the thinking process because I personally discovered a situation in which I helped people build a perfectly logical, rational analysis of a problem and came up with the solutions at all. And the powers that be looked at it and said, oh yeah, that's very interesting. And nothing happened. They did not embrace it. And I thought, how could they not? The logic is right there. Okay? We're going to talk about why apathy or resistance to change occurs and the role of risk aversion in that. Then I'm going to give you a proposed strategy for initiating change, and then a proposed change development and persuasion process. Finally, we're going to talk about executive presentation, and at the end, monitoring and responding. So here's a typical scenario. You go through the kind of an exercise you've been going through for the last week, and maybe it takes you longer than that because it's a real world thing and you're going to do the entire current reality tree and you're going to do the entire future reality tree and resolve conflicts. And sometimes this doesn't take 7 days, sometimes it takes weeks to get this done. You get it done. You think it's polished and ready for prime time. You bring it up to the decision maker in perhaps in a decision briefing. You tell them what the problem is with the current reality tree. You propose the solution with the evaporating cloud and the future reality tree. You may even give them the one or more prerequisite trees to show how you're going to implement the solution. And you get one or more of these reactions. Well, yes, but, and then they come up with some sort of a counter argument. Or, that looks pretty good. Very well done. Excuse me, I got to get on to another meeting. Which basically says you didn't make an impression enough on me for me to consider this. And the kiss of death, which is, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. And then nothing happens. Why does it happen? Well, the reason is because logic is not enough. Human emotion and motivation and behavior enter into the equation, and this means that factors other than logic are very likely to be even more decisive. In other words, personal agendas and politics. If you can, and think about this when you are proposing a logical tree, if you cannot show that the speaker or the presenter of the tree is uninformed, misinformed, or illogical on relevant matters, you simply cannot disagree. You must agree. But people don't. You cannot say, as so many people do, I find nothing wrong with your premises and no errors in reasoning, but I don't agree with your conclusions. All you can possibly mean by saying something like that is you do not like the conclusions. You are not disagreeing, you are expressing your emotions or prejudices. So if you want your thinking process analysis to succeed, first thing you have to do is anticipate that there will be pushback. Somebody is going to not like what you have to present for some reason. Recognize it when you see it because it may not be overt. I disagree with that. I think it's wrong. Your analysis is flawed. They won't attack it directly. They probably can't attack it directly if you have invested the time and energy and the logic in it. When you anticipate that pushback, understand what's causing it and take steps to trim that negative branch before it happens. In other words, have a plan to deal with it both before it occurs and then when it actually surfaces. Why do people resist these new ideas? Well, this is a little device known as Rotz Cloud, and Rotz Goldratt was his daughter. And she came up with this as an undergrad in psychology in 1995, wrote an article about it for a psychology publication in Israel, gave it to me in an English form as a draft, I think because I was a college professor at the time and she was looking for some peer review or whatever, and so I was more than happy to do that. And I looked at this cloud and I said, holy cow, this is powerful, exceedingly powerful, because it basically is the reason behind human motivation or lack of motivation. And what she basically said was, in order to be happy, people must be both satisfied and they must feel secure. In order to be satisfied, they have to initiate change. In order to feel secure, they have to resist change. Now, what makes this really make sense is understanding the definitions here. She defines security not the way we typically think about it, but the sense of confidence and well-being that people get from the predictability of events. Okay? I may not feel secure walking around the streets at night, but if I can predict the fact that I can make that trip from here to the store and back, even though it could be dangerous out there, if I predict that I can do that safely, I will feel somewhat more secure than I would otherwise. Satisfaction is the feeling of well-being that a person gets from achieving a difficult objective when there was serious doubt as to whether the objective was achievable. In other words, if there's a high probability of failure and in spite of it you succeed, you really feel much more satisfied than if you're doing something that's relatively easy to do, even if you get praised for it. Okay, I get praised for it, but it wasn't that hard to do. But if it was really hard to do and people are cheering and clapping, then I say, yeah, okay, that feels good, all right? Now, here's the key where the prerequisites come in. Satisfaction usually comes only from initiating change, because the unusual and difficult objectives that have to be done are not usually accomplished by doing the routine behavioral things that we normally do. Why? Because if it were that easy, we would be doing them all the time and there would not be anything exceptional about the objective. So when it requires some extraordinary effort, winning a sports championship or something, typically what we have to do is we have to change our behavior in some way to do something different in order to achieve a really difficult objective. All right? And so that means initiate change in some way. On the other hand, in order to feel secure and predictable about events, we want things not to change. We want things to remain the same because that's the way they remain predictable. The same argument applies to organizational change. There are people within the organization who would love to be more satisfied in their jobs and would love to take chances to do things new and different. And then there are people who don't want to resist change because they don't want to take a chance with their job security. So the fact is you have to recognize that change is going to pose a risk for the initiator. If you are the initiator, that's you. If the satisfaction versus security dilemma, in this, change clearly leans toward the satisfaction side and not changing toward the security side. And the degree to which a particular person, meaning a decision maker or even an initiator of change, will embrace or resist change depends on whether they tend to embrace or avoid risk. So how do new ideas get into an organization? Well, there's 3 different ways they can get in: at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom. Rarely does it happen at the bottom. Equally rarely does it happen at the top. Most often it happens in the middle. If it happens at the top, it is discovered and embraced by a senior executive or a manager who has nearly unlimited authority to apply it. At the bottom, it may be discovered by line employees who have almost no authority to make changes. But typically what happens is middle managers, the functional managers within the organization, are the ones that discover things like Lean, Six Sigma, TOC, business process re-engineering, all of this stuff. Why is it that the middle managers jump on this? Well, Who are middle managers except aspiring top managers? They want to get to the top of the heap eventually, and so consequently, they're looking for things to establish their credibility and make a reputation that will warrant promotion for them. So they're thinking, if I can find some kind of a new way of doing things that increases the performance of the organization rather dramatically, I'm going to get the credit for that, and maybe I'll get promoted up to a higher rank. I mean, even if it's a Peter Principle promotion, it's better than nothing, okay? So what they do is, middle managers, what do they do? Typically they say, I need to get a master's degree to improve my capabilities. So they go out to college and they learn things. They see things that are new, that the people who are at the top levels, busy running the business, they don't pay attention to the new developments out there. Middle managers do. Middle managers look at that and say, you know, that could work in our organization. Oh, this is a great idea. Let me learn more about this. They come back to the organization with this wonderful idea. And now they don't have the authority to apply it, so they have to persuade up. Yep. And to some degree, they have to persuade down, because the people who are down below, they don't have any power to implement, but they sure have the power to torpedo something. So the middle manager is stuck. They're the only ones who are out there really, truly looking for new things and new ways to do better. But they don't have any authority to apply, and they are in the persuasion business. Guess what? That's almost all of you. All right. But one thing I can do is I can give you a suggested presentation strategy for how to make the change more palatable and more likely of success. When the goal tree is complete, present the goal tree to the senior decision maker for acceptance. So you show it to the boss, and here's what you get from it. First, you get the confidence that you can proceed on with the change, knowing that you're going for the right objective. And number two, if you get them to nod their heads and say, yep, that's what I want to do, then they cannot come back to you later and say, no, that's not what I wanted. Oh, yes, it is. You told us. The first time through, you presented the goal tree to the ultimate decision maker and got his approval to go solve the problem. Yeah. The second time through, it's going to be only the definition of the problem. But before you do this, you're going to review the goal tree with the boss and say, all right, you remember when we started this process, you agreed that these were the outcomes we were trying to achieve? Yes, I remember that. Okay. This is our cut at what the problem is and why it exists. And now you're going to go, in the light of that goal tree, you're going to go through the current reality tree that defines what the problem is.